Stocks are down. Take a look there as President Trump announces new tariffs, 25% on both Japan and South Korea. They're the first of dozens of new tariffs the White House is expected to announce in the coming days as the president pressures trade partners to negotiate new deals.
They're going to be tariffs. The tariffs are going to be the tariffs. I think we'll have most countries done by July 9th. Yeah. Either a letter or a deal.
But they go into effect on August 1st.
U.S. markets, they fell sharply the moment that these letters announcing the tariffs on Japan and South Korea came out. You see the Dow is down 520 points, about 1.2%.
No warning sirens, no loud declarations, just a silent ship departing from Canada's Pacific coast, heading straight for Asia. But that ship carried a chilling message. Canada is no longer standing behind the United States. While Washington continues to wrestle with digital taxes, election controversies, and prolonged political instability just across the border, Canada has been quietly crafting a nearly decade-long energy strategy. And now they're making their move. The result: Japan, South Korea, and China, three of the largest LNG importers that once belonged firmly in America's corner, have signed multi-billion-dollar deals with Ottawa, while the U.S. was caught flat-footed. Gas that once flowed south is now heading west across the Pacific to strategic allies America long assumed were its own. Is this simply a missed business opportunity? Or is it the first crack in the wall of global influence that the U.S. spent decades building? In today's video, we're going to take a closer look at this story. How did Canada manage to leap ahead? And more importantly, if we don't act quickly, what's waiting for us 5 to 10 years down the road? Before we begin, please note this video is for educational purposes only. It presents facts and opinions from public sources and does not aim to promote any political agenda. In less than a year, Canada has taken a series of bold and strategic steps on the global energy stage by signing multi-billion-dollar liquefied natural gas (LNG) supply agreements with three of Asia's largest economies: Japan, South Korea, and China. What makes this especially significant is that these three countries have long been traditional customers of U.S. natural gas, relying heavily on LNG exported from ports along the Gulf of Mexico from Texas to Louisiana. Could this have a serious impact on the lives of Americans? What's really happening here in Japan? Two major gas companies, Toho Gas and Tokyo Gas, have signed long-term LNG purchase agreements with Canada. Tojo Gas agreed to buy approximately 300,000 tons of LNG annually for 15 years, starting in fiscal year 2024. Meanwhile, Tokyo Gas reached a basic agreement to purchase around 600,000 tons of LNG per year for 13 years, with flexible delivery points, allowing them to redistribute based on market demand. Both deals are designed to leverage Canada's new infrastructure in Kitimat, home to the country's first LNG export terminal located directly on the Pacific coast. In South Korea, the ties with Canada run even deeper. State-owned KOGAS, the world's third-largest LNG importer, is not only seeking long-term supply sources, but also holds a 5% strategic stake in the LNG Canada project. Its early involvement signals a strong commitment to securing a stable, clean gas supply from Canada, one that remains insulated from the geopolitical volatility of the Middle East or the trade conflicts between the U.S. and China. China, although it has not publicly announced a specific commercial contract, has established its presence through ProChina, the country's largest energy corporation, which currently holds a 15% stake in the LNG Canada project. This means Beijing is not just a buyer, it is also an owner and participant in Canada's LNG supply chain. This is a strategic move that helps China secure long-term energy security as the country gradually transitions away from coal and seeks lower carbon energy sources. These are more than simple business handshakes. There are strategic agreements that open new LNG trade routes directly from Canada's Pacific coast to ports across Asia, bypassing the cross-border pipeline system with the U.S. and redrawing the map of North American energy exports. If this phenomenon continues, Not only will the US lose market share in the LNG sector, but its geopolitical influence in Asia could also shrink significantly. Canada hasn't said much, but clearly it has acted swiftly and decisively. According to Shell's LG Outlook 2025, global LG demand is expected to grow by approximately 60% by 2040, driven primarily by rapid economic expansion across Asian countries. In this context, LG Canada holds a major geographical advantage. Its location on Canada's Pacific coast makes it ideally suited for serving Asian markets. Cedric Camers, Shell's head of integrated gas, stated that LG will be a major contributor to Shell's role in the global energy transition over the next decade. Shell also emphasized that Asian countries facing immense energy needs are gradually shifting away from coal. LG offers a suitable alternative, producing significantly less carbon when used for electricity generation. As a result, LNG is increasingly viewed as a transitional fuel in the shift toward renewables, making it highly attractive to Asian markets and creating substantial commercial opportunities for the LNG Canada project. Beyond its international significance, LNG Canada is also delivering clear economic benefits to local communities in British Columbia. Shell noted it has worked closely with local and Indigenous communities throughout the project's development. Once both LG trains are fully operational, the project will provide a stable and competitive energy source for global markets, while strengthening Canada's position as one of the world's leading LNG exporters. While Washington is caught in a whirlwind of internal issues, trade disputes, deep political divisions, a tense presidential race, and endless digital tax negotiations, Canada has been quietly preparing a nearly decade-long strategic counterattack that almost no one noticed. The LG Canada project, worth 40 billion Canadian dollars, is not the product of a spontaneous idea or a short-term political reaction. It's a carefully crafted plan approved back in 2018, and since then, Canada has steadily built it step by step with persistence, silence, and strategic calculation over the course of 5 years, despite the CO-19 pandemic, market volatility, and supply chain disruptions. Canada remained on schedule, constructing a massive liquefied natural gas facility in Kitimat, British Columbia. This project is not only a feat of engineering, but also a quiet declaration that Canada is ready to play in the big leagues of the global energy race. Meanwhile, the United States had come to assume that Canada would continue to serve as a secondary supplier, pumping gas through aging pipelines into the northern states and supporting much of the U.S. domestic energy market. That assumption caused Washington to become complacent, failing to notice that Canada was quietly building its own gateway to the ocean, breaking free from its dependence on the U.S. market. When Canada's first LNG shipment departed Kitimat at the end of June 2025, heading to Asia instead of flowing south, it wasn't just a shipment. It was a declaration that Canada had achieved strategic energy independence for many Americans. The image of Canada remains one of stability, cooperation, and friendliness, a gentle neighbor to the north. But that very perception led Washington to overlook a geopolitical turning point. Canada doesn't just want to sell LNG, it wants to control market share. What makes this even more striking is that the major investors in the project aren't Canadian companies, but global energy giants like Shell, Petronas, ProChina, Mitsubishi, and Korea Gas. They view Canada as a safe, reliable place to invest, something the U.S. should reflect on deeply, especially as global capital shifts away from politically unstable environments. While America has been busy adjusting the rules of the game, Canada quietly built its own stadium and invited the global audience to watch. This counterattack wasn't loud, but it has redrawn the energy map and directly challenged the United States leadership in the global gas market. If Washington doesn't wake up soon and recalibrate its strategy, for the first time in decades, U.S. Americans might find ourselves importing LNG through the very route we once dominated. Throughout the 20th century and into the early 21st, the United States was the global conductor of the energy orchestra, not just because of its abundant natural resources, but also due to its infrastructure ecosystem and strategic trade alliances. But by 2025, a new reality is emerging. The U.S. is slowly ceding its leadership role in LNG exports to its northern neighbor. So what led to this sobering shift? Well, there's more than one reason. The first reason is not a shortage of gas, but a shortage of infrastructure vision. The United States has enormous natural reserves, but it lacks a long-term strategy to build LNG export infrastructure aimed at global markets, especially toward Asia. Most of the U.S. LNG export terminals are concentrated along the Gulf of Mexico, specifically in Texas and Louisiana. While these are powerful production centers, exporting LNG from here to Asia requires passing through the Panama Canal, which entails high costs, frequent congestion, and significant geopolitical risks. Meanwhile, Canada saw further ahead. It built the Kitimat port in British Columbia directly on the Pacific coast, cutting more than 10 days off the shipping time compared to U.S. Gulf Coast LNG carriers. No need to traverse the Panama Canal. No waiting. No reliance on intermediary nations. This wasn't just a geographic advantage. It was a strategic move Washington didn't make or didn't care to make. What's next? Domestic politics distracted and destabilized U.S. decision-making. Many analysts have pointed out that in recent years, both Republican and Democratic administrations have been caught in a vortex of internal politics, partisan infighting, bipartisan gridlock, and unstable policymaking. A stark example, the dispute over digital services taxes with Canada. While President Trump was publicly attacking Ottawa on Twitter, Canada quietly removed the tax and within hours sent its first LNG shipment to Asia. It was a powerful contrast. America was talking. Canada was acting, and the result, Canada earned the trust of Asian partners, while the U.S. was increasingly viewed as an unpredictable and unreliable supplier. Lastly, the U.S. made a strategic miscalculation by underestimating the Asian market. The domestic U.S. market is now saturated in terms of LNG consumption, whereas Asia is the true goldmine of the future. According to Shell's projections, LNG demand in Asia is set to grow by 60% by 2040, led by Japan, South Korea, China, India, and Southeast Asia. Yet, Washington continues to behave as though the Asian market is secondary. Canada, on the other hand, has fully pivoted toward the Pacific, investing in tailored infrastructure, building bilateral trade agreements, and crucially, not letting domestic politics entangle its foreign energy strategy. Can you imagine the consequences the U.S. might face down the road? Spoiler alert, it's not just about losing a few percentage points in export market share. If we continue to lack strategy and let our neighbor dominate the Asian LNG market, America's global standing will erode even further. First, we'll lose export market share. LNG isn't like retail, where customers switch based on price. This is a long-term contract game. Deals often last 10 to 25 years. Once countries like Japan, South Korea, and China are locked into stable agreements with Canada, U.S. ports will fall down the priority list. No matter how competitive our prices are, the gas supply chain from port infrastructure, shipping fleets, distribution networks to insurance mechanisms once established with Canada creates huge market inertia that makes switching suppliers undesirable. This means that 20–30% of the LNG America could have sold to Asia will likely be locked out by Canada for at least the next decade. This is a golden opportunity lost, just as Asia's LNG demand is reaching historic highs. And once market share is lost, what's next? In an era of multipolar power competition, energy isn't just fuel, it's diplomacy. It's soft power used to shape regional influence. For the U.S., liquefied natural gas, LNG, has been one of the most strategic tools for maintaining influence in Asia, a region that accounts for 70% of global LNG demand and includes key American military allies such as Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Taiwan. But now, that energy stick is gradually slipping into Canada's hands, weakening America's voice on the Asian chessboard. In Countries like Japan and South Korea, where domestic energy production is virtually non-existent, with dependency rates of 90% and 85% respectively. LG is more than clean energy. It's the backbone of national energy security. A stable LNG supply keeps power plants running, heating systems operational during winter, and industrial production on schedule. Since 2016, the U.S. has been a trusted LG supplier to these nations. Our relationship with Asia has been bolstered not just by weapons, but by gas. Everything would have remained stable if we had protected that role. But Canada had other plans. They didn't send troops to Asia. They didn't intervene in territorial disputes or impose sanctions like we did. Instead, when Canada became Asia's primary LNG supplier, they brought with them a non-political trade relationship, something countries like Japan and South Korea desperately crave in today's age of global volatility. If the US loses its energy stick, we will lose leverage at critical forums like APEC, the Asian G7, and even military negotiations with frontline nations like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. And it's not just global consequences. We'll see rising instability at home. America once prided itself on being the world's leading energy superpower, not just because of vast reserves, but because of its global-scale LNG exports, which created hundreds of thousands of jobs, billions in tax revenue, and kept industrial states humming. But if we continue to lose LG market share to Canada, a domino effect may unfold right here in the heart of America. The two largest LNG states, Texas and Louisiana, now face potential revenue shortfalls, especially if long-term contracts with Asia go to Canada instead. Major export ports like Sabine Pass, Corpus Christi, Cameron, and Freeport, which once saw weekly LG shipments to Asia, may soon find themselves underutilized, operating at low capacity, and triggering waves of indirect layoffs. This won't just hit big energy firms. It will impact tens of thousands of plant workers, technicians, subcontractors, and industries from shipbuilding and logistics to mechanical maintenance. While the South struggles with falling exports, northern industrial states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Michigan, where LNG is used for power generation and as feedstock for petrochemicals, steel, and heavy manufacturing, could also face serious disruption. If domestic markets become oversupplied due to export bottlenecks, gas prices may fall erratically. That volatility could wreak havoc on long-term production planning and investment in factories. Energy-dependent industries like metal energy, cement, and chemicals will hesitate to expand or hire, leading to job stagnation in the Midwest as LG export hubs decline. Energy sector jobs will vanish, and these are not easily replaced positions. Where will the existing skilled workforce do mechanical engineers, gas technicians, pipeline specialists go? Oh, these professionals cannot simply shift into retail, restaurants, or delivery services. Meanwhile, green industries like renewables or battery storage are still too young, lacking the scale and momentum to absorb this workforce in the short term. The result? A hollowing out of high-skilled labor, long-term unemployment, and declining confidence in the future among America's technical middle class. A nation cannot function properly if its middle-class technical workforce loses motivation. A decline in morale leads to decreased productivity, reduced innovation, a higher rate of industry attrition, and ultimately shakes the technical foundation that has been the backbone of the American economy for over a century. As you can see, losing LG market share to Canada isn't just a commercial loss, it's a blow to the internal structure of the U.S. economy. It threatens energy state stability, job security, social cohesion, and even political trust in the system we've built. The United States stands at a crossroads. One path leads to a slow slide away from global energy leadership. The other offers a chance to reclaim strategic strength if we are alert enough to act swiftly, decisively, and with long-term vision. Expanding LNG export infrastructure on the West Coast has become more urgent than ever. Currently, the majority of U.S. LNG is exported from ports along the Gulf of Mexico, such as Sabine Pass and Corpus Christi, which must pass through the Panama Canal. This route is not only time-consuming, but also subject to capacity limits. Tolls for LNG tankers transiting the canal can range from $300,000 to $450,000 per trip. These costs not only inflate the overall price of U.S. LNG, but also significantly undermine its competitiveness in the Asian market. On top of that, prolonged drought in 2024 forced canal authorities to reduce shipping capacity by nearly 30%, causing delays and disruptions for U.S. LNG vessels, a growing and tangible risk. Meanwhile, Canada, thanks to its deepwater port in Kit, has cleverly sidestepped all of these choke points. Its strategic location allows LNG tankers to cut travel time to key markets like Tokyo, Busan, and Taipei down to just 10-11 days, compared to nearly 20 days from the Gulf Coast via the Panama Canal. That's no small advantage. The U.S. could absolutely compete if it built similar infrastructure on the West Coast. States like Oregon, Washington, and even Alaska once proposed LNG terminal projects, but most have been stalled or canceled due to drawn-out approval processes, legal conflicts, and pressure from environmental groups. If these obstacles can be addressed soon, America could re-enter the race and regain its footing. Additionally, we must swiftly renegotiate and expand our long-term LNG contracts, this time with greater flexibility and more attractive terms. Incentives in pricing, shipping costs, or technological support are no longer optional. They are prerequisites for retaining key customers in a rapidly restructuring global market. We must also recognize our core strengths. While Canada is gaining ground due to geographic advantage, the U.S. holds a different but equally critical asset: technology. However, this strength will only become impactful if deployed aggressively and at scale. In today's highly competitive LNG market, investment in advanced liquefaction technologies is key to preserving U.S. leadership. New innovations in natural gas liquefaction now enable more efficient gas compression, lower energy consumption, and most importantly, significantly reduced CO2 emissions compared to previous technology generations with proper investment and large-scale implementation. This could make American LNG not only cheaper but cleaner, meeting the increasingly stringent environmental standards of regions like Europe and Asia. However, cutting-edge technology is of limited use if constrained by weak infrastructure. America's domestic LNG supply chain, from gas pipelines and liquefaction plants to specialized shipping fleets, needs a comprehensive upgrade. Current bottlenecks at major transfer hubs have already caused the U.S. to miss critical export opportunities, like in the winter of 2022, when global demand surged, but operational capacity fell short. In addition, Washington needs to create conditions for the private sector to take a deeper role in this field, particularly through the development of LNG microterminals, small-scale, flexible liquefaction facilities capable of efficiently serving niche markets or developing countries such as the Philippines, Vietnam, or Thailand. While these markets may be smaller in scale, their demand for LNG is growing rapidly, and they have the potential to become long-term partners if approached strategically. And finally, we must address the solution for workers. No matter how strategic a plan may be, there will always be periods of downturn and restructuring in the LNG sector. The federal government must take the lead in protecting workers, starting with supporting the career transition of those currently employed in the LNG industry. Providing career transition support for LNG workers is not merely an act of compassion. It is a strategic move to safeguard the social fabric and ensure long-term economic stability for the United States. Every industry goes through cycles of rise and decline, and LNG is no exception. Even countries with the strongest strategic foresight face periods of restructuring, capacity cuts, or business model shifts. In such a context, the federal government must play a proactive leading role, not merely respond after damage has been done. One of the top Priorities should be to implement thorough in-depth retraining programs for the skilled technical workforce in the LNG sector. These should not be basic superficial courses, but robust reskilling initiatives that transition workers from LNG to adjacent and fast-growing fields such as hydrogen, offshore wind energy, energy storage, or carbon F-free power plant technologies. Utilizing an already well-trained workforce saves social costs, shortens adaptation periods, and helps maintain the stability of the technical middle class, a core force in any major technological transition. In addition, a local economic stabilization fund should be established, supported by both public and private sectors. This fund would be crucial for small communities whose economies are heavily reliant on LNG port activity, such as towns in Texas, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania. As export capacity declines, these localities will be the first and most visibly impacted, experiencing business closures, reduced tax revenue, and labor outflows. A stabilization fund can provide low-interest loans, trading support, and investments in alternative industries, helping these communities sustain their economic lifeblood. Lastly, strong coordination between federal, state, and local governments is essential. A lack of policy coordination was a key reason tens of thousands of co-workers in the 2000s fell into total unemployment, losing jobs, insurance, and homes. With no timely support measures in place, that mistake must not be repeated with LNG, flexible oversight mechanisms, effective job transition funds, and that most importantly, a proactive mindset in policy are needed. We cannot wait for a crisis to act. Protecting workers in the LNG industry is not just about saving a specific sector. It is about preserving the sustainability of America itself during a global energy landscape. In this new energy era, Canada has moved one step ahead, quietly preparing for nearly a decade to launch a carefully calculated counteroffensive. Meanwhile, the United States, the former leader, is now being held back by outdated approval processes, policy inertia, and a dangerous complacency that assumes we are naturally number one. But we must remember, power is never guaranteed. It must be protected, invested in, and renewed every single day. America still has everything it takes to turn the tide: world-leading technology, abundant resources, and loyal international partners. All of it is still within reach. The question is, will we act in time? Will we have the courage to give LG the strategic importance it truly deserves? So what do you think? Can the United States rise once again to lead the global energy race? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you because meaningful conversations like this are exactly what America needs now more than ever.